Um, so I'd like to talk a little bit today about, I'm going to give an introduction to what the Satoyama Initiative is, and then talk a little bit about landscape diversity. Oh, yeah, this is probably a little better. Landscape diversity and resilience, then introduce a few case studies and a project about indicators of resilience, and then a few lessons learned. So first, the Satoyama Initiative, probably not too many people are aware of it, but it's an initiative that was started up to and around 2010, with especially around the time of CBD COP10, which was held in Japan, through an initiative by the United Nations University, along with the Ministry of Environment of Japan. And it's a global effort to realize societies in harmony with nature. So we heard a little bit earlier about the different models of conservation that have been used. And the most recent one, which he mentioned, was started around 2010, was people living in harmony with nature. So this is a global effort to sort of put that into practice. And it does so by focusing on the revitalization and sustainable management of landscapes and seascapes for people in nature, particularly focusing on landscapes and seascapes where human production activities are a major part of the interaction between humans and natures. So agricultural and fisheries and other areas. The idea of sustainable landscape and seascape management in this context is the basic principles behind the idea are that humans and nature can support each other at the landscape level. So that in a way that with sustainable management, with ideal management of a landscape, it can provide humans with the goods and services they need without causing a negative trade-off in the natural environment. So there are actual mutual benefits between human production activities and biodiversity. We just heard in the last presentation a little bit about the idea of a mosaic landscape. The research leading up to the Satoyama Initiative has found that a dynamic mosaic of land uses and habitats is one of the most important factors towards sustainable management. And then also, of course, importantly, is that landscape management should be tied to local culture and knowledge, using the culturally and naturally appropriate knowledge and practices that are specific to the specific landscape we're talking about. So there's no one-size-fits-all solution for everywhere in the world. And we have some examples of different landscapes here. There's a lot of different words for landscape management. I think landscape approaches are very popular in a lot of fields these days. You can hear about historic landscapes or cultural landscapes and so on. The term that's been used among Satoyama Initiative circles is the idea of the socio-ecological production landscape and seascape. Again, these are landscapes and seascapes. They're characterized by a diversity of habitats and land uses, including human production activities. So this kind of landscape or seascape can be found in different forms in many different places around the world, from the Pacific to Europe. On the right side of the screen, we have East Asia and Southeast Asia. Of course, Southeast Asia, including Thailand, is also an important area. And the role of the Satoyama Initiative in this is bringing together knowledge and expertise and practices from all of these regions so that we can have mutual learning with each other. Of course, landscapes in almost all of the places in the world these days, due to a number of different pressures, are facing many different threats and challenges, from urbanization and overexploitation and industrialized sort of monoculture-based agriculture, to abandonment, on the other hand. In many places, rural abandonment is actually leading to a loss of biodiversity and ecosystem services in a lot of places. So on the other hand, think of a more maybe simplified, less diverse landscape. Here's a diagram of a landscape which is dominated by one production activity. So this is monocultural farmland, and then a community that relies on and lives in this landscape. There's a lot less diversity between the interactions between human and nature, and the community, its economy and culture are both very heavily dependent on this one product that they produce, whether this is rice or corn or whatever this could be. So, moving into resilience, if you think about the first landscape, this is the same slide, when we start to think about what happens with changes over time, there's natural changes that we've been talking about, climate change, there's also market changes, all kinds of changes in the world that happen over time. If you think about a landscape that's very diverse, like this one, with a lot of interactions, when it changes, I've changed around the colors and some of the crops and products and cultural things that are going on represented by different colors. And there's a different kind of processes and interactions between humans and nature in this landscape. But although it has changed, there are some changes, it's still recognizable as the same sort of thing. So it's maintained its basic character over time. Looking at the other landscape, the very simplified landscape that we talked about earlier, here you have the monocultural farmland. If this, due to some market processes or something, this crop that they rely completely on is no longer marketable. And in this case, here's a landscape that has changed into an industrial landscape. And cropland has been changed to industrial plants. This landscape, in this case, is still functioning as a landscape, but it's completely changed its character. The economy is based on a different processes, and the culture that was based on farmland before is now an industrial society. So it's in a way it's been less resilient to changes over time because it didn't maintain its same character. It's completely changed. So that's a little bit about diversity and resilience. Some of the findings on landscapes and seascapes are from actual research have shown that the loss of sustainable management of landscape does have actual significant negative consequences on humans and biodiversity in terms of lifestyle, health, and other issues. And then that for the kind of sustainable landscape management that we are hoping for, because the landscape is such a complex entity with a lot of different things going on, a holistic approach is needed rather than focusing on any one sector or product or anything. And that the land management should be multifaceted, multi-stakeholder, and multi-level to help simplify our landscapes become diverse again and then maintain landscape diversity for greater resilience. So this is the conceptual diagram that was built out of those concepts for the Satoyama Initiative. The vision at the top is the societies in harmony with nature, and then there's a threefold approach with different things. I won't go into too much detail. This is available on our website if you're more interested. Please look. And then we have 6 ecological and socioeconomic perspectives informing the approach, including community resilience on the right side, among other things. So that's a basic introduction to the Satoyama Initiative. For the implementation of the initiative, the partnership that I am representing today, the International Partnership for the Satoyama Initiative, was created, or IPSI. At this point, it's more than 200 member organizations around the world, very diverse organizations. And it promotes networking and collaboration for implementation of the initiative. And moving into what we do in terms of implementation, we're a partnership. We bring together case studies from our members. We put them all on the website. And it's a great resource for people working in different fields and different places in the world to interact and learn about good practices from other places. I want to talk about some of those case studies today, that are ones that are particularly relevant to the topics that we're talking about in this forum. Here's a case study from Taiwan involving agriculture activities in these terraced paddy landscape. Terraces, as many of you probably know, are extremely labor dependent and require a serious long-term commitment to maintain them. But they have been found to have a great advantage in terms of water regulation and flood control. In facing a lot of the problems that we've been talking about already, including floods and rural abandonment, has been a big problem, because this is keeping those rice paddies going requires labor, which requires money, so they need a lot of long-term commitment and economic commitment to make these rice paddies possible to maintain. And one of the solutions they've found is to use product branding, especially of the actual rice that's grown in these paddies. And they've found that informed consumers are actually willing to pay a little more for rice that's branded according to that it's said to be grown in this area, which involves sustainable landscape management, and that's been able to support the community and the landscape even better. Another one, I have a couple of slides here about mangrove-related activities that I brought because I saw this as a mangrove-related forum. One of these is in Ecuador, and this is an interesting case because their whole project is actually based on a species conservation, especially the species, this kind of crab, which is an important crab in the area. And they've been able to get the community involved because the community relies on the crab, and the crab and the mangroves, the crab lives in the mangroves, and the mangrove supports the crabs, and then that actually helps the fishery because the mangroves make the fishery even outside of the mangrove area the catches are improved. And then the community is interested because they can see clearly that they're the beneficiaries of the benefits that are made by conserving the mangroves. And this is all made possible because of more traditional species-based conservation, which is more easy for people like in the government, some people in the government, I should say, to understand, because they understand species conservation. So this is bringing together multiple levels of governance, including the community, including the youth is an important part of this project, and they're hoping that will mean that it will be continued far into the future because the youth are interested at this point, and then they will be interested as they grow older. And then they would score themselves their landscape on how, it's a very subjective process. It's their own opinion of how strong they think their landscape is, in this case, against shocks and stresses. And then, importantly, to discuss the scoring results among the community and think about why are we good at this area but not good in this area, and what can we do to improve. So I brought one example. This is an area in Niger called Lake Tabalak, and this is a process in which the community is suffering from a lot of silting and runoff and erosion in the landscape due to deforestation and other issues. So they were brought together to hold a workshop and assess their own resilience, and then implement some activities to help improve that based on using the indicators. This is from their results that they came up with. Ecosystem protection, you can see, is the area where they thought they were doing the worst. So that was an area in which they decided to focus especially hard in ecosystem protection. Now, just moving into the last section, I want to talk about key lessons learned. Some of these are similar, but with a new perspective, I hope, from previous presentations. The first one I want to highlight is community engagement. Top-down approaches sometimes can be good, but sometimes don't work exactly. So we're talking about keeping communities engaged in all stages of planning and implementation of any projects and interventions in their communities. And the communities for that purpose really have to be made aware of how they are the benefits. They have to beneficiaries of the benefits that are gained from strengthened resilience and landscape management. Second one is the long-term commitment to implemented measures, especially areas like, this is, again, this terraced landscape in Taiwan, but a mangrove forest is a similar thing. It's not a quick process to create a mangrove forest. You can't take a top-down approach and have the government come in and plant a bunch of mangrove seeds and then walk away and forget about it. It takes long-term commitment. And the long-term interaction between the human community and the landscape is what makes it more resilient and more sustainable for the long term. Finally, again, I mentioned earlier, multi-scale, multifaceted, and multi-stakeholder planning and governance. The landscape or seascape is a complex entity. It involves a lot of factors, a lot of players, a lot of interests all interacting, and it's very important that all of the, as wide a spectrum of interests be represented in any management regime. This goes both vertically, as I mentioned earlier, all the way from international levels in some cases, or at least national government levels, all the way down to the community. All of these levels have to be sort of working in the same direction, or you won't get anywhere. And also horizontally, in terms of all the different people working at the community level, it's important to get them all involved, have them working towards the same shared goal for their mutual benefit. So thank you for your attention. We have a website for the International Partnership, which I hope you will look at. And if any of you are interested in the partnership or more about our processes, our activities, I'll be here for the rest of the forum, so please feel free to say or ask anything. Thank you very much.